Good morning, everybody.
Congratulations.
It's loud and very active. I suppose I'm going to introduce the authors here today. I'm Zain Khalid, but before we begin, I want to let everybody know that the books by the authors in this program can be purchased from Greenlight Bookstore over to the right. It says point to the right, so the authors will also be signing their books immediately following this program at the signing table next to the stage. At the conclusion of the program, we ask everyone to leave their seat. This doesn't apply. I'm going to introduce them in order, because that's the way someone should do that, I think. We have Jenny Fran Davis, received her MFA from the University of Iowa, where she was an Iowa Arts Fellow, the author of Everything Must Go, a novel for teenagers. She lives in Brooklyn. Diquette is her first novel for adults. To her my left is Kyle Dillon Hertz, who received an MFA in fiction at NYU, where he was the Writer in Public Schools Fellow. His work has been published or is forthcoming from Freeman's, Men's Health, and Esquire. He lives in Brooklyn. His most recent work is The Look Back Window. And furthest from me, perhaps for good reason, is Andre Dubuis III. His 8 books include the New York Times bestseller House of Sand and Fog, The Garden of Last Days, and his memoir Townie. His most recent novel is Such Kindness, and he has an essay collection, Ghost Dogs, on killers and kin, forthcoming. Mr. Dubuis? How do I say it?
Dubuis.
Dubuis. See?
Yeah. Abuse with a D.
Dubuis with a D.
Yeah.
Mr. Dubuis has been a finalist for the National Book Award, has been awarded the Guggenheim Fellowship, the National Magazine Award for Fiction, 2 Pushcart Prizes, and is a recipient of the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award in Literature. His books are published in over 25 languages. He teaches full-time at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. That's it. A round of applause, maybe. I think it makes sense for each of them to read from their novels for 5 to 10 minutes and see how well it goes. And then we can have our conversation. Andre, why don't you start?
Okay. Real quick, thank you for being here on this beautiful day, everybody. Can you hear me all right? Okay. I'm going to read from this new novel called Such Kindness. In the opening scene, 54-year-old Tom Lowe has lost everything. He's fell off a roof. He was a builder, got addicted to painkillers, lost his marriage, lost his house, lost his health, lost custody of his son, and his car just got towed. This is how this cheerful novel begins. He's just stolen trash from the banker who sold him an adjustable rate mortgage because he's going to do credit card fraud and get the money back from that banker. And now he's lying on his plywood couch in subsidized housing, Section 8. He calls it the 8. I have spent many hours contemplating pain. Its constant presence seems like such a dark joke, really. Like the school bully who sits on your chest and spits in your face years after both of you have moved on. My pelvis and hips were fractured years ago. Do they have to keep spitting in my face? It's close to 9 and I lie on plywood over the cushions of my couch in the 8. On the floor near my feet is the Andrews household's unopened trash bag. From here I can see through the thin plastic the outlines of commercial-sized envelopes, a sheaf of papers, and what looks like a pencil. On the other side of the wall there's only quiet, no yelling, no barely muffled video games, no fucking. All day and night, I hear through its concrete walls the muffled sounds of bad behavior. Trina yells at her babies. She calls them names. She swears at them. Sometimes her boyfriend, Brian, will be there, and he yells and swears at them all. Some got their units here in the 8 by lottery, others because their family names were on the list for generations. I got mine through my former brother-in-law, Gerard, who was a boy when I married his older sister. A man who is now a lawyer and who in act of pity secured me my own unit here in the 8. My neighbor Fitz drives a new Mustang. It's red with tinted windows, and when the inspectors come to check in on us, he hides it out behind the dumpsters filled with wet diapers and cigarette butts, with old TV sets and eggshells and used condoms, with plastic toys and empty bottles of wine. Fitz only pays me 75% the value of my EBT card. It's what I have to do so that I can buy the liquid pain distractor that keeps me from falling back to the O's, that and toilet paper, which I'm not allowed to put on my EBT card. After Fitz's cut, I'm left with only $100.38 for the month. And now Drew's birthday is in less than a week, though I have never stopped thinking of my son, ever. In the unit across the dirt yard from Trina's lives a young couple. He's black and she's white, and if I add their 2 ages together, I've still been on this earth 10 years longer. The woman's name starts with an A, Amber or Ashley, and she must have gotten pregnant in high school, and now they have 3 brown babies, all under the age of 6. Those kids are always dressed in clean clothes, their hair and faces washed. 2 boys and a girl their mother doesn't let play with Trina's kids, who are not clean and who do not wear clean clothes. Trina's little one, Cody, 5 years old, looked at me one summer afternoon as I rose slowly from my Taurus, and he opened his little mouth and yelled, "Fucka!" In the next unit over lives an old woman. I believe she's close to 100. Every afternoon, a visiting nurse shows up in her blue Corolla. She spends an hour in there, then leaves. On Sundays, the old woman's son picks her up for church in his sedan, its rear passenger doors covered by white letters in cursive, Bon Giovanni Shoe Repair. He's a big man like me, though he has 20 years on me and is clean-shaven, his bald head covered with a scally cap he takes off before stepping into his unit. For the 1000th time, I think that I do not belong here. I do not belong here with any of these people. Thank you.
Thank you. Kyle, you want to go?
Okay, I'm going to read just from the opening of my book, from the very first word. I escaped to a resort of extraordinary beauty. This way, when the news stories appeared, I'd be in such an otherworldly place I could act like I'd only been dreaming. I pitched it as a vacation of Moans, a way to get away before our impending wedding. I showed him the site for the Monarchs, a luxurious oceanfront hotel in Florida, and we booked a room. Before we departed, I took a sedative to ease the journey, and I returned to consciousness outside the wooden gates. Scores of palm trees concealed a pool, 2 hot tubs, and dozens of naked men. The owner stood with his hands on his hips and surveyed his territory, telling us that he had planted these trees 40 years ago. He hadn't expected the foliage to grow so wildly, but with coastal life came onslaughts of rain, and all that sustenance had shifted the foundations. Nothing can prevent the course of nature, he said, so I took off my clothes and wandered the property until I found a spot in the shade to be alone. The world felt very far away. No matter how hard I studied the petals, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't completely exist. I placed my feet on the hot stone patio and searched for 3 red items: the second hand of the hot tub clock, the Limp Resort flag, the rusty fractured stones lifting from the earth. Sweat dragged down my chest as I followed a blue hummingbird to a feeder. "Would you like a bottle of water?" a pool boy asked, watching me lean over the railing into the trees. "You don't have to drink with the birds." We would stay for a week. We kept to ourselves at first and spent afternoons by the pool, reading and lifting our sunglasses to flick our eyes at certain men's conversations, or when, despite the casual nudity, a man seemed particularly naked, even if he wore briefs or a cap. Moans belonged to that category. He wore navy trunks. Piercings, tattoos, the way men walked up the pool steps, reaching for a towel before it was within their grasp, all contributed to a taxonomy. They were uninhibited, curious but ashamed, and some of them introduced themselves as nudists, while touching their chests as a priest might grasp his cross. Among them were men who had been denied what they wanted for half a century, men so old they felt unseen. Some questioned if they could be desired. Others knew. One idiot in his 50s flopped around on a floating pool chair, attempting to use his dick like bait and tackle. Moans is 34 to my 27, and I was covered in tattoos and silent. The men even commented on this like, "You're a quiet one," after they tried to get the meaning out of certain ink. I offered nothing. Mostly I kept to my novels.
Woo! Lovely. Thank you. Jenny?
Hi, can everyone hear me? I'm Jenny. My book is called Diket. It's about three gay couples who go upstate for an ill-fated 10-day vacation in the country estate of the oldest couple, who's in their early 40s. And I'll just read from sort of the beginning, a scene where some of the tensions that are simmering begin to come to a head. Okay. Sasha excused herself to check on the pizza. The cheese was bubbling and had acquired a crispy brown film in certain places, glistening where she drizzled the surface with olive oil. Smears of burrata had melted into creamy circles nestled within pockets of tomato sauce. It was almost ready. In the background, Lou was describing an essay they were working on for an anthology one of their friends was editing for Nightboat about the pathetic genre. The pathetic is always kind of sexy, Lou said. That push and pull. Sasha waited until the last possible minute to beckon them into the kitchen for dinner. They took their places around the big oak dining table and marveled at the pizzas, 3 steaming orbs set between the Gothic candlesticks that Jessie had found in a closet and lit. Vivian settled herself on a fur pelt at the far end of the table. Everybody cooed. Vivian's the pug. Jules took a seat at the head of the table, and Miranda sank into the seat to Jules's right. Darcy came next. Lou sat at the other head of the table. Sasha sat next to Lou, and Jessie arranged himself between Sasha, on her good side, and Jules. As they sat down to eat, having already watched them outside, separate from her, it was easy for Sasha to simplify their roles, to make them into caricatures. If Jules and Miranda were their Hudson king and queen, the ever so slightly staid matriarch and patriarch tasked with keeping everybody in line, then Darcy and Lou were their sexily unorthodox prince and princess, the ones who were naughty and subversive, but still royals, next in line for the crown. Jessie and Sasha were like a pair of low-ranking nobles, a duke and duchess from some far-out kingdom, lusting thirstily for their share of the family jewels. Everyone tucked into the pizza with verve, emphasizing how good it was in a way that made Sasha question if it actually was. Pulling apart strands of cheese with their fingers. Libations were flowing, wine, beer, hard seltzer, ginger-flavored kombucha. In the background, Jules's record player cranked out Mariah Carey's Christmas album. Sasha ate one piece of pizza, then another. She stroked Vivian's velvet forehead, fed her chunks of cheese. She snuck a look at Jessie, willing her to notice. Her only thing is that she's into sex, Sasha had rage texted Sylvie the night of Halloween while she watched Darcy Jankovic read on the Aphrodite's Instagram story in a loop. Like that makes her cool or something. Sasha was powerless. All she could do was cast aspersions that made her sound like a prude. Like that made her original or something. When she'd gotten back to her apartment in Providence on Halloween and found that Jessie had not texted, she'd undressed, stood topless in front of the bedroom mirror, shoved her tits up with her left forearm, and snapped an angry picture of her reflection. Fuck, Jessie replied to the photo an hour later. Sasha waited, but no further message followed. All he said was fuck, she seethed to Sylvie after 45 minutes had passed. Probably he's so turned on, Sylvie texted back charitably from her own bed in Brooklyn. And that's why. But Sasha knew that wasn't why. Jessie no longer loved her as much as he once had, and this was because of Darcy. The only proof she needed was in the text messages he had sent her. The way he showed his love for her was by simply saying so. It had always been that way. And by saying very little, he was announcing, however tacitly, his dwindling interest.
So we have this lazy taxonomy of class as kind of a catch-all for whatever we want to talk about. Like it becomes socioeconomic, it becomes race, it becomes it's almost mutable as a definition. And so I didn't want to be presumptuous in threading the books together, though I have in some places. But that's more from a sentence perspective. I'm interested in how each of you. I mean, Andres, your book is like pointedly about class, like the socioeconomic elements, but it also it also contends with like kind of paranoia, like the bully sitting on one's chest. Kyle's does that differently, and Jenny's also like disfigures our idea of what class might mean, especially within the construct of this sexism, or this, I don't know what the correct sextet. But I guess how did you guys come to your relationship with class, and how did you express it through the novel, and like where your inquiry lies, like what's yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it. My particular inquiry, I think, lies in the question of like status, and definitely along the lines of class in the social realm. Who has what objects mean a certain level of status or sort of clout in a particular community, and sort of beyond the like traditional like gradations of socioeconomic class. What are like the sort of material realities and objects that that sort of like illustrate how someone lives and how someone can aspire to be and can aspire to live, in terms of belonging and community and insider versus outsider identities.
How do you?
After you.
My book deals with like the Child Victims Act in New York, which is if you like aged out, if you had been a victim of a crime and had previously aged out of the statute of limitations, you were granted like a 1-year window to sue your abusers, and it actually created its own taxonomy of classes of victims, because during this 1 year where you could, again, have a civil case, most of the law firms only took cases that had to do with these like gargantuan kind of like entities like the Boy Scouts or the church, and the people who like, you know, were just like assaulted by kind of regular folk, by randoms, which is obviously the majority of human beings, basically like could not get a case. And so it ended up creating like within this like already stratified system, the legal system, and then within that it created like a lower class of victims who were trying to get money but just couldn't because they were not assaulted by a major institution. So on one level, my book deals with that, like what to do when like you were not assaulted by like a rich person or someone with insurance, because people ended up who were assaulted by people with insurance or entities with insurance, they got lucky, which is sad. And then the other part of my book is that the main character is in a marriage where his husband's the rich one, and he's kind of like, you know, being paid for in a sense, and he's trying to escape it, which means he needs to find a way to make some kind of money to even get out of a bad marriage, because otherwise he won't even have the opportunity to search for justice, because all he's getting is what his husband's giving him, and then trying to leave a bad marriage when you have nothing. It's like, I don't know if I can curse, but like, fuck, what are you gonna do?
It's Brooklyn.
I know, it's being videotaped, so I'm like, what can we say?
Thank you for that question, Zane. I mean, for me, fiction writing is a free fall into my psyche in the dream world. And I grew up with a single mom in poverty. I grew up with a woman with 4 kids, living alone. She had to choose between paying the rent on time or heat in the boiler, or putting gas in the car to get to work, but no groceries. And so I grew up in scarcity, but I haven't lived in scarcity as an adult, because my writing took off after 20 years of working on it. It took off. And I was able to raise our own kids in abundance. And for most of my writing life before I became a professor, I was a self-employed carpenter. I cleaned toilets. I worked the doors of bars. I worked manual labor jobs where if you don't go to work, you don't get paid. So I go to work with the flu. I go to work sick. I go to work injured. And now I've got a job where I can call in sick for a week and I still get paid by the university and my publisher. And so the question fueling my novel Such Kindness is, what if my writing never took off? What if I was still a self-employed carpenter? I've got a mortgage, I've got kids, I've got tuitions, and I get hurt and I can't work. And so the whole novel came from my terror of falling back into the poverty I grew up in, frankly. It's a very hopeful book. You should read it.
That's an interesting. I do wonder about. So there is a pervade. It's interesting that kind of flip because it's almost a. You sometimes feel like a class trader if you did not come from this abundance. And then you naturally you wonder about you have that hypothetical, and I wonder if now. Have you excised that demon, so to speak? No, of course not, right?
No, I go to the mill town where I grew up, and no one talks to me anymore.
Yeah.
I was on Oprah. Get out of here. Who used to be one of us? But I feel too that with this character Tom Lowe in this novel, his marriage breaks up not so much because of his accident and their disaster financially, but he always felt a chasm between his wife. He calls his wife an abundist because she grew up in abundance. She grew up in comfort. Yeah. And he was never able to bridge that cultural chasm. Yeah. And he considers himself a scarcitist. And he could never get to the abundance that she came from. And it killed their love. So I get the class trader stuff.
Yeah. Jenny, you also have a similar kind of... who has it and who doesn't, and what is that gap unbridgeable? But in yours, it's like social capital. So I would ask for a definition of social capital, but then I would ask more than that. It almost seems preternatural in the novel. It seems like either you have clout or you don't, and if you try to assume it, you won't. And but the grasping element is the thing that is seen as most the worst. It's the worst part of someone. It's the part that wants. So how did you come? How did you come to that?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the sort of the scarcity versus abundance question as it relates to social capital, and I think. Social capital can be really dependent on this idea that it's scarce and that it's impossible for everyone to have it, or otherwise it would be meaningless or something.
Yep.
And I really like what you said about desire or wanting of capital is sort of an automatic sign or signal that you don't have it, and so even the act of desire is like an admission or a surrender to one's base state of not having social capital or clout, and it's an interesting thing because it doesn't so neatly align with other systems of power, and it can be a very sort of slippery thing also. But I think the main sort of undercurrent of the question of aspiration and sort of desire to obtain social capital is that it's scarce and that it's actually sort of the opposite of abundant. It's very small and hard to get, and can be gone just as easily as it can be captured.
Well, it's an assumed scarcity, right? It's not actually there is almost a reckless overabundance of attention. And we keep on talking about the attention economy, but it's perhaps more true that in Kyle's book actually, once money happens, there becomes again an immediate an escape, right? And I think that it's interesting to think of class as sort of wherever you are, you want out, right? And in Kyle's book, the character wants out, very very badly, but also wants safety, but then wants out from that safety. I wonder if what your relationship to that sort of scarcity argument would be. Do you think that we are are we attempting to, are we lying to ourselves in thinking that we have abundance, or that we have to try it all to solve for our own failings, if that makes sense?
I mean, I think, at least in my character's like journey, it's just like when you're in survival mode, like all of that stuff like kind of goes out the window because you're really just trying to be like what do I literally need to get out of this place? And I think once just so like all kind of like literacy on like what abundance and scarcity means, like when you're actually in survival mode, like literally disappears, because then it just becomes like, what can I do to like literally leave this bad marriage, to get out of danger? And so by the time that you like have what you need to escape, by the time you've escaped, it's over. You don't have it anymore, and it turns into like, okay, now what do I do to like soothe myself, to make up for the fact that like I no longer have that money? I mean, kind of like in the section you were reading about like addiction. It's like in my book too. Once the character like really runs out of everything, he starts smoking crystal meth and doing all these drugs, because I do think like when you're in that position of having so little, when you have that little bit and then it goes, you just like lose any kind of delusion that like you're gonna have. Yeah. You're gonna have again, and you just turn to ways to like disappear reality.
Totally agree. I don't think we can have this conversation without talking about capitalism. It has its ravages. It has its good points, but it has its ravages. And for me, I think the biggest ravaging aspect of the kind of capitalism that we've lived in for over 200 years in this country is I think we still break our citizens down into winners or losers. So we live in a misogynistic, racist patriarchy. Well, who are the winners? Rich white men. Who are the losers? Everybody else. And this, whether we share these values or not, it pervades and poisons all relationships, I think. And I think it still leaves us all grasping for power and status and a foothold on this cliff, which is entirely man-made. We can have a communal culture, but we don't have one.
Well, I wonder then, like, what's interesting is none of these novels presume to know what comes next, and I actually appreciate that, because I don't believe that literature fundamentally functions as answers, but like a window to look out, like it's just a forehead pressed against a window, right? And so I wonder what you would say. So, to detail something accurate, like almost to set any stage, it requires an excessive detailing, right? Like, and I noticed that in each one of your novels, and like, and that excessive detailing is always, in almost each case, imbued with this paranoia of something coming, or even when it's drug-addled, even when it's in serious pain because of an injury, or even when it's truly like an emotional sort of pain, like when like they're or romantic pain, and so I thought of a few sentences, and I mentioned this to Kyle earlier. There's a sentence in his book that I think about. I've been thinking about this. The sky was as blue as any conspiracy, and I love that sentence. I don't know. It's that distance that you kind of have to travel for a metaphor to work, and it's beautiful. And then I actually noticed a lot of descriptions of the natural world in all of these novels, and also the the social world. Like for Jenny's book, it also thrilled Sasha and Jesse to consider themselves among the chosen by these successful older gays, that they were relishing in their adjacencies. And then every scent is bad. I don't, like, there's like nothing smells good in any of these novels. In the air there are smells of fresh garbage, and the sadly festive scent of dead leaves in Andre's book, which I thought was lovely. The scent was now that of old seasonal lattes, tepid and slightly sour because of the body odor coefficient. Like, this is, it's interesting. Like, how do you, so as writers, you make these conscious choices, right? To make those, to imbue it. But then I wonder, Kyle, about like the almost survival mode, and sometimes I wonder if writing is that and becomes this. You said delving into your psyche. Do you happen to simply like this is a beautiful day? Would you describe it as the dilettantes gathering to suck at your like vampiric dilettantes? Like how would you then like? Do you see the like? How do you see the world separately from class? Like, can you ever separate from it?
You mean from the point of view of your character?
Yeah, but also your point of view, right? Like, it's also like you naturally just said, like, Kyle, you said survival mode, like, and that's something that you either feel or you don't. And you mentioned, like, we live in a system that is naturally corrupt. Everybody is losing. How do you find any semblance of meaning or happiness or anything when you are confronted with those facts? And you write, and if you write from a perspective that is a little bit perhaps more clear-eyed, then how do you live day to day? Like, where do you eat ice cream? What do you eat? Like, that's kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'm resonating with something you said a while ago about like excess, and I think that is a huge way that I personally cope with writing, but also the characters in Die Cut, I think, are really constantly engaging in like various shows of excessive emotion, excessive dress, excessive speech, excessive feeling, excessive affect. And I think that also is, that sort of seems like a response to this maybe false dichotomy of scarcity and abundance in the sense that like our personal choices can feel really maximalist and excessive and fun and almost like manic. And I think that mania can sometimes switch over to paranoia, as it does with Sasha, who's the protagonist of the book. But I think sort of like feasting on excess in personal choices can often feel like maybe a bit of a resistance, but also I think ultimately probably by the end of the book and as I live more, also I'm seeing that it's sort of like to choose excess, to choose to be like over the top or too much or too performative, too loud in some type of way, can often feel like like a bit of a escape in a sense, but doesn't ultimately solve much. But also the point of writing isn't really to solve anything or to answer these questions. It's just sort of like a mode of escape from the sort of stifling boundaries of our normal social interactions and lives.
I think like the quote about the sky that you read, and then kind of with a little bit of what we're talking about, like when you have nothing, like your body is your economy. Like when you have nothing, like the pleasures that you get through like looking at the world, through fucking, through smoking, through drinking, like that's like literally like all you have. So I think specifically with, and that's for better or worse as well, right? That's like when you have nothing and, you cope with drugs, you cope with all these things, because when, you have no capital, the one thing that you have is your mind and your body. And so I think, like, for me, writing with people like that, who, like, that's all they have, you do want a sentence like that to really capture their mindset, which is to perfectly, kind of the existence of their consciousness with the kind of mode that their mind has been melded into already. You don't really want to see the metaphor. You want to like look directly through their eyes, because when you start to feel like a character making a comparison, to me, you almost like really feel the hand of the author, and it really takes away that kind of magical consciousness experience you have. And then when you're dealing with these people who don't have things, like you need to feel the world through what they're saying. So when it's like all things that's, when things smell bad, it's like even when things smell bad, they smell kind of good, because at least you're fucking smelling them.
Yeah.
It's like when you lose everything, it's like even the bad stuff feels kind of fucking good. And I think that's a lot of where that comes from in life and in books.
Yeah, I completely agree about that sort of like the authorial sort of hand. What I appreciated about a lot of your writing is that it kind of flensed it of that. It was just as you saw. And Andres also does that a lot. It is simply stream of consciousness. It's almost postmodern in that way. Like it kind of has this what you read also. But I'm sorry to have interrupted. I just agreed.
No. By the way, I love your phrase from a few minutes ago. When money happens, like when you get sick. When money happens. I love this line from Rumi: "Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment." I just love that because I try to write with bewilderment, and I try to write with an empty vessel, and I'm sure you guys might agree. I just try to become these characters, and this character hates that he's lost everything, and he's very resentful at the beginning of the novel. He changes, which surprised me, but I want to get back to your earlier point about paranoia. I do think, and I try not to think thematically when I'm writing fiction. I just try to be these people the way an actor tries to be a character, but I see it in the revision. I saw it in the revision. If we live in a culture, which we do, which breaks its citizens down into winners or losers, and if you're at the very bottom as a loser, you are constantly aware of your reflection in the cultural mirror as being at the bottom. And probably the obverse is true if you're at the top. But I think it's toxic. I think it robs us of our abilities to be in moments with each other, with authentic engagement. And I wasn't trying to say any of this in that novel, Such Kindness, but I found being Tom Lowe, the main character, was really, I felt so self-conscious. I'm a man who's lost everything. I'm a fucking loser. Oh, I swore in Brooklyn. Sorry. And he stopped seeing himself that way, which surprised me.
Yeah, there's a moment in your book where he's also forgiving the police officers as they're arresting him.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really like it was almost Judas. It was almost Jesus on the cross, and it also made me wonder, like if as writers you almost are prostituting, or you're making every part of yourself saleable. Kind of like when you only have your mind and your body. You're immediately commodified, like almost like every aspect of you, every element of your identity, every bodily, everything. And I wonder then what how do you guard? So in the prose, are you guarding against that? Is this almost, in some ways, writing is a rebuke? It's a caustic abuse of, like all of these are in some ways criticism. Like it is a lens through which you are abusing society in ways that these characters are abused by sort of like reflecting that through like an imperfect mirror. But I wonder, like for me, I'm almost tired of the abuse. I've almost given. Is it our jobs to continue that line of reasoning? Because is there not like the surrealists did it too, right? Like there's a way to do it without sort of addressing it so plainly, and also perhaps robbing yourself of so much. Because when you write about this plainly, not plainly, but like this pointedly, it's a toll that you're taking on yourself. And I wonder, is there a way to disfigure it or pervert it such that it no longer, like, or it allows you this remove, like that actual psychological, like the oneric, the kind of the be the ferryman of Hades, not necessarily the person dying, you know.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this idea from Sedgwick that like paranoia is about a fear of exposure, and that at least in the process of writing paranoid characters, it's really interesting to think about what they're afraid of being exposed, what they're afraid of being exposed as, what parts of themselves are like kept and revealed through their sort of interiority that we get to write as writers, but also their interactions with other characters. But I think also with that, like, that guiding idea of like paranoia is fear of exposure, and then if we as writers just expose everything, and sort of just like by really methodically detailing the world as we see it and experience it and observe it and how the characters do, that's sort of a salve, and that's sort of like as far as we can go and as far as we need to go, just describing the world, describing every part of it, exposing every part of it, and not needing to come to like distinct conclusions or answers or anything, but sort of like not sort of like rejecting the fear of being exposed by just choosing to expose.
I mean, I'm like an exhibitionist and a masochist, I think, like most writers. And so I feel like when you're in the zone, you're not even really worried about this stuff. Like, mostly what you're worried about is like not having it sound kind of real, because I almost feel like most books don't even go far enough, because I'll like read a lot. Allegedly about like, for example, like gay life in Brooklyn, like I'm a part of, and I'm just like, this shit sounds so fake to me. I'm just like, literally, like, where's the truth? Like, where's the anger? Like, my book was called like a very angry book. It's in the Times today, and the title's called A Journey into Hell, which is like kind of true.
It's
but
Rimbaud. It's that Rimbaud. No, The Season in Hell. Sorry.
And it's like, I feel like writers should be concerned, honestly, with going harder, being more truthful than they really are. Because a lot of books just seem like they don't even touch what they're trying to touch. And either that's because it suffers from like aboutness, where a writer's like, let me write a book on class. And then you feel like someone's playing Monopoly with words, annoying, and it's like, shut the fuck up, like put away the game. And then you talk with your friends and everything feels so real to you, what you're angry about, like what's happening in the world. And sometimes you read books that don't do that, and it's so frustrating. So I think books need to go harder. Authors need to go harder and like really just tell the truth.
Yeah. Amen. Same, but I heard you. I think you were asking us also if it has a personal cost on the writer.
Yeah.
To shine the light. I love this line from Blaise Pascal. It's harsh, but I love it because I think it's true. He said, anything written to please the author is worthless. And I love that because it's not about us. It should be about trying to capture the truth of these characters who I consider sacred beings. I think they're sacred, these characters who are asking us to bring them to life on the page. And our job is to not judge them, but to write with empathy, compassion, and curiosity and bewilderment. But it does take a cost, because they can take you to some really painful places. And I think, that's why writers should work out and get acupuncture and shit.
Yeah, or drink
Get a massage. Well, drinking has been the the occupational hazard for decades. But
yeah. Well, I actually think the anger is actually a really good point. I think that none of these books they're either like it's either bemused, it's bemused, sort of a bemused shrug at everything, and that is like not useful. But anger is fine so long as it isn't moralizing, I think.
Yes.
So long as it is also directed inward, and I guess that's the problem.
That's a challenge.
So like it also has to be any caustic abuse of the world is a caustic abuse of yourself. And your book is a very good example. Kyle's book is a very good example of that, like taking apart oneself. And so I think anger just needs to be, like, sometimes when you say the thing too plain, like a lot of like
so annoying.
Yeah, it gets kind of it's kind of ridiculous because it's like climate change is bad. You're like yes, we're aware. It's like, what if water was scarce? And you're like, yeah, all right, fine. That's who knew. But then of course there's no anger backing it, right? Sometimes there's nothing, and that has to be personal. So that's not really it's more of a comment than it is a question. I guess the last thing we don't, if there are any questions in the audience, you're more than welcome to ask now, or I guess forever hold your peace. I don't know. No, nothing. Okay, well in that case, I think we're all set. The signing is right there. I apologize for not having a good denouement.
No, that's fine. Thank you all for being here and reading books and writing books.
Thank you.
be great.